Okay, I think we are ready to go. Thanks for joining us. I'm really excited about this next hour of conversation. We're going to start. This is like a webinar setup, so there is a Q&A area. I know there's going to be a lot of questions, and I do want to make sure we leave time for that. But I don't know when this idea started for me, but I think it was Mike Hardy, our one of our guests here, is an old friend of mine, and he was telling me about Opportunity Zone Fund that he had started and that he was really passionate about. And it got me thinking about, wow, that's a really interesting idea. And it seems like something that is really meaningful, or really something that the real estate community ought to know about, because it allows a different option for sellers to sell rental real estate that's exposed to capital gains tax, and pull some money out immediately. Their initial basis comes right back to them, and their gain can go into this Opportunity Zone Fund, and that still defers the tax in the same way a 1031 does. So it's similar to a 1031 in that it's a tool for people to defer their taxes when they're selling their rental property, but it's different than a 1031 because they don't have to buy another piece of real estate on the other end. So it's a way for people to kind of pull some money out of their rental portfolio, take some immediate cash because their basis, which is not a taxable amount, comes right back to them, and then their profit can go into this fund and still defer taxes for a period of time. So I think I have to believe there are a lot of property owners that own rental properties that are cash flowing just fine, but have a lot of equity. And maybe the only reason those owners are not selling is because they don't want to pay the bill. They're like, oh, I'm just happy to take my $1,200 a month forevermore, and I guess I'll never see this $600,000 of equity that I have in this house, or whatever the case may be. If you bring this idea to them, they might get the gears turning. I'm of the mind that if you know people that own 3, 4, 5, 10 properties, and you bring this idea to them, they might think about, wow, there's this one property that's always been bugging me. I would love to just sell it. And if I don't have to pay taxes, let's list it. It's a great market, et cetera, et cetera. So without further ado, that's, in my mind, that's why this idea is important, and how we can use this idea to create more listing inventory. And so I'm going to hand it over to Mike and Trevor, who are partners. Mike's the founder of the Cyrus Opportunity Zone Fund. And I'm going to he has a presentation here where they're going to explain how it works, what are the benefits, what are the limitations, and then when we're done, we'll do questions. And then the follow-up is really going to be me trying to brainstorm with you guys on how to bring this to the market. Who do you know that knows people that own a lot of real estate? So put a pin in that, and we'll get back to that later. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Mike Hardy. And thank you so much for being here, Mike. What do you got for us?
Excellent. Thank you, James. Trevor's going to get us started, and then we'll get into the advantages here. So thank you for having us. Much appreciated.
Oh, you got it. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think you laid it out pretty well there, James. And we'll start going through this pitch deck here, slideshow. But you're exactly right. We look at this as, 1031s are great, but it's an alternative to the defer until you die kind of strategy, and allows people to access a lot of the appreciation and things that they may not be able to otherwise. So Mike and the group here, we like to call it the best tax strategy that you've never heard of. So we'll be better equipped as real estate professionals, financial advisors, mortgage professionals, whatever it is, as we move forward. So real high level, just quickly, as you mentioned, this is relatively new. It's established in 2017 with the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. So now we're only, getting further into it. You mentioned the elimination and deferral of capital gains tax. Of course, Mike will go further into that. And there is a sense of urgency. As of now, it's only open for new investors until the end of 2026. So that's definitely something to keep in mind. And of course, we're talking real estate, but another thing that Mike will touch on is that it can be capital gains from just about any source. So people selling a business or stocks or things like that as well. So we're just going to try to plant the seeds of a lot of different potential scenarios that this could be a great fit for. And as you mentioned, we'll have questions and answers at the end, and we'd love to hear from everybody. So I'm going to have Mike go ahead and take it away. He's the founder and principal of Cyrus Opportunity Zone Fund. And Mike, tell us a little bit more kind of about your background and about, yeah, I found an old picture of you, James. I don't know. I just Googled it.
No, that's fine. That's fine. I used to keep my hair a little shorter. But before Mike gets going, I think it's probably goes without saying, but I think we need to say it. This is a tax strategy, and all of the people we bring this idea to, you're going to definitely want to bring in a tax professional to confirm what we're talking about. And it's a great opportunity to network with either their accountant or bring your accountant in to that conversation. But anyway, I just want to, now that we're being recorded, I want to make sure that gets
out. Yep, that's a great point. And we've had a lot of great conversations with CPAs and our tax counsel, things like that. Of course, we're not tax professionals, so consult your own tax and legal professionals before making any course of action or anything like that. But so Mike is the founder and principal of Cyrus Opportunity Zone Fund. He's got a background in the mortgage industry and financial advising as well. So Mike, tell us a little bit more about that. Tell us about the high level opportunity zones in general, and why you founded Cyrus, and maybe a little bit more about the specifics of Cyrus as well.
Excellent. Well, guys, this will be a fun conversation. I heard a saying one time that I really like, which is one new idea or one new relationship can completely change the trajectory of your life. And this was one of those ideas for me that was a life-changing trajectory. And we're going to get into this. So just to set the stage for this, I remember also hearing a saying, which was, we all have the world that we know, and then we have the world that we know that we don't know. And then there's this whole other world that's a world that we don't know. And that's what this was for me. So think of the computer screen you're looking at as the world that you know, and then the office you're in is the world that you know you don't know, and then the city you're in is the world that you don't know you don't know. And as we go through this journey of life, we're always evolving and seeing and learning new things. So what are we going to cover today? I'm going to tell you a little bit about the backstory about how this developed. And then I want to get into some of the pain and the problems that investors have. And then we'll talk through the possibilities that exist in a path that very few people have heard of. And funny story, so a little bit about me. I actually grew up quite poor. In fact, some of my early memories were living in a mobile home trailer. My sisters and I were in the far end, and my parents were in the other. My dad was going through school and getting his PhD, and so just had very little money at the time. And then over the years, watched him do real well, got an MBA, and just did some big things in business and life. But I ended up understanding and appreciating the power of real estate, the power of hard work, and then the power of innovative thinking. And I think there's a big difference between a couple of different areas that I want to just touch on. One is making money. The next one is keeping money, just the effective habits. And then the third one is effectively and strategically growing money. And part of that growing money bucket is effective tax strategy. Okay. So there's investment and then tax strategy that accompanies that investment. And so the way that I came across this was really interesting. My background, I was actually pre-med undergraduate, but didn't want to go to medical school. Ended up getting a business minor and went into securities and worked as a financial advisor for the early part of my career. And then moved into the mortgage space and became a real estate investor. And I've been real estate investing now for about 20 years. So, and I share that because about 4 years ago, I was the chair of the financial advisor committee for Azusa Pacific University, and we were doing public-facing education. So I just want to share like how just serendipitous this came about. And so we're doing a presentation forward-facing to real estate professionals, financial advisors, CPAs, investors on the different strategies of investing in real estate. And we're talking about the 1031 exchange, DSTs, charitable remainder trusts, the 721 provision. And there's this new kid on the block called the Opportunity Zone. And we could not find an expert. Okay, this is a number of years back. And it had just come out as part of the 2017 Tax Act. And so I remember telling the panel, we have experts for every area except the OZ. I will just research it. I'll take a smaller section and do it as an investor and do the presentation. And so long story short, I had to spend about 3 weeks saturating in the tax law this new idea, the Opportunity Zone. And my mind was blown. I got to tell you, I did the presentation. And for the next 6 months, I was thinking, why are more people not doing this? And there's a whole number of reasons why. It's kind of a complicated animal. So I have fund management experience in my background and realized that this is what I see as a once a generation, maybe once every several generation window of time that will benefit two different parties. It will benefit investors, and it will also, it's set up specifically to attract money and capital into underserved areas. Okay. And so that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about just how this developed, but then we're going to get specifically to the advantage for investors and then also real estate professionals that are working with investors. So as I get into this, first of all, James, I want to give a hat tip to you. There's very few people in life that you find that you're like-minded with that truly care about doing great business and serving people and doing it with excellence. And so James and I met, I don't know, it's a number of years back now, but we go to all the same conferences, and James has been a part of a top performing group in the mortgage business. So James, thank you for putting this together for us. I'm much appreciated.
You got it.
So the backstory is this came about in 2017. And if we can go to the next slide here, I want to talk about the benefits of an opportunity zone. And as we're talking about this was set up specifically to attract capital into underserved areas. And an opportunity zone, part of the 2017 Tax Act, each state was given the ability to designate 20% of their state land as opportunity zone. And it was meant to be, the spirit of the law is that the 20% of the area of each state is supposed to be like the lower income areas of each state. And it's meant to attract capital. So two things: give significant tax benefits to investors and direct that incentive through and into underserved areas. Okay. The benefits of the OZ are this: when capital gains are placed into a qualified opportunity fund, taxes aren't due until tax day of 2027. That's one of the benefits. Next is, and this is the best one, I'm going to talk more about each of these. I just want to give you high level first. This is very similar to the thinking of like a Roth IRA, but capital gains that remain and grow inside of a qualified opportunity fund and stay there for a 10-year window can come out earlier if needed. But if it stays there for a 10-year window, all of the growth that takes place inside of that account will be able to exit without any capital gains tax due. Best thing I've ever seen in the tax code. Okay, best thing ever. And then, of course, also return of principal. If you invest in an opportunity zone, you actually get your investment. You can push the gains in, but you get your principal back. We'll unpack this more. This is high level. Okay, so let's get into, let's go to the next slide here. And I want to talk about this fund specifically. So what is the point here? Building wealth through communities. And there's a saying I really like, which is by Charlie Munger, which is, if you show me the incentive, I will show you the behavior. Okay, what our fund has done, and the reason I set this up was to really solve my own pain. I've been an investor for a long time, and in fact, I'm looking at a reverse 1031 exchange right now, done forward 1031s, but I've had many 1031s that it just couldn't fit. It wouldn't work. Okay, and when I did the research on this, I come to find out that in any given market, somewhere from 10 to 20% of 1031 exchanges are busted, which means that investor that was super excited and had this perfect plan for moving from one property to another and continuing that deferral process, now all of a sudden they're hit with a sizable capital gains tax bill. I was one of those investors, and I started realizing This opportunity allows me as an investor to have a really, really good plan B for capital gains if you're a real estate investor. And not only that, but it also allows for other capital gains, cryptocurrency, stock market gain, doesn't matter what it is, any capital gains. If those gains are moved into a qualified opportunity fund, which is what we have and we've established, you then get the benefits that I was just talking about of deferring the capital gains tax until April 2027, and all of the growth gets to grow and then exit the fund tax-free if it stays there for 10 years. Amazing. So again, I spent months thinking, this seems too good to be true. How is it possible? And it finally dawned on me that the amount of money that flows into underserved areas, I'm thinking, I always think like, what's the issue? What's the problem here? What am I missing with this? And I came to realize how brilliant this strategy was, because it allowed areas that would never have capital in there, or rarely have significant capital, get a massive influx of capital. So it's going to completely revitalize certain areas and bring them from lower income, and bring substantial tax base and growth into those areas. So it's brilliant from a, just from a policy standpoint. Okay, so what is our strategy? Address the massive housing shortage. We do a lot of fix and flips and improve properties, and we also do ground up multifamily. Our focus, and we have a little bit of a niche that is above the mom and pop, but below the bigger Wall Street funds. What we've found is there's a lot of inefficiencies that exist below where Wall Street wants to play, but above just sort of the typical everyday investor that we've got. And then our advantage is just having been an investor, and then with being a partner in a mortgage company, we have a lot of looks at market opportunities that actually never hit the market, off market opportunities, people that don't need to sell quick for whatever reason. So that's some of the things that we do. I want to stay focused specifically for a little bit on in fact, we'll move to the next slide. There's my favorite quote, or one of them. Show me the incentive and I will show you the behavior. Show me the incentive and I will show you the behavior. So what we're doing is we are investing in ways, and I'm a very key and sizable investor in my own fund, but this was set up specifically to be able to solve the pain of investors that want a better option when they have real estate that's appreciated, that does not have an ideal 1031 exchange strategy, or simply wants to get out of the market. And I know for me personally, I've been doing fix and flip projects for a long time. And by doing this, I ended up with a significant amount of capital gains over time. And I came to realize that by doing this and having the fund set up, I would be able to defer and grow all of those gains, but take my basis back, just as James was talking about earlier today. So we got a couple of examples that we're going to go through. In fact, Trevor, maybe I'll tap you in just for a minute so I can get a glass of water, get some water, and talk through this example right here. But there's one of the things that's very unique on this next slide that every investor needs to know about. And one of the challenges with a 1031 exchange is that you have to keep moving everything down the line and everything down the line and everything down the line, or your money is tied up. And something that's really unique about this is the splitting of basis and capital gains. So Trevor, why don't you take this one?
Certainly, yeah. It's sometimes called one of the hidden benefits of Opportunity Zone funds. Of course, we talk about the elimination of capital gains taxes and the deferral on the front end. But a lot of times when people are doing the mental math going, well, I need to replace my cash flow. You're telling me, in James's example, I'm getting however much a month, things like that. And all, they're still thinking like a 1031 and thinking everything has to get rolled over. I got to keep playing bigger and better with the up leg. And hey, I'm a cash flow investor. I need X amount per month, which there's nothing wrong with thinking that way in that same vein of a 1031. But this, I would say, is kind of maybe not the silver bullet, but it's a pretty good one to have in the chamber when you're talking to sellers who say, no, I would have to replace that income and this and that. You can do back of the napkin math and explain to them, look, whatever your basis is, you're taking that back cash free. That cash back tax free. So you can reinvest it. You can go buy a boat, like James had said. You do whatever you want with that, but that kind of helps I don't want to say soften the blow, but it's a different way of looking at it than a 1031. So in this example, we'll go to a chart in the next one as well. But you sell something for $2.5 million and capital gains are $1 million, you immediately get to take that back tax-free. I'm sorry, the basis is 1.5 and your gains are $1 million. You put that into the fund. So like we talked about, you defer those initial capital gains taxes. That growth within the fund can be completely unlimited and tax-free when the exit occurs after 10 years. And so for those folks who, in a way, it's like tapping into the appreciation or the equity of their property without having to keep playing the 1031 game. So I'll do a quick overview of this next slide here, and just know we would love to, we've got our emails and stuff at the end, but we would love to send you, we have a calculator that underlies all of this, and it takes into account, paying those deferred taxes and the compounding effects, and you can change, the different amounts, of course, and the rates and things like that. But you can screenshot this. Of course, it's getting recorded and everything as well. So the point is not to get into the nitty gritty, just to show how big of a difference those compounding effects are when you either start behind the 8 ball by paying a huge chunk of your gains in capital gains taxes, right? Because then you could go invest whatever it is, 80%, but you're already behind 20%. And so with the Opportunity Zone Fund, yes, those taxes are deferred to a specific point in time until 2027. But because that time is the full amount, you're actually getting that compounded growth on the full amount, which is really powerful. So we don't have to go super deep into the weeds on this, but I'll kick it back to you, Mike. But the point is, on $1 million over 10 years, the difference on those is $500,000. I mean, it's a pretty significant difference between going a traditional route, paying the taxes on the front end and on the back end, versus investing in the OZ fund and deferring and eliminating those taxes.
Perfect. Thanks, Trevor. So, and guys, I'll just share this. This was approached by me as an investor specifically. How can an investor win? And this is not meant to be in fact, the next one, we'll go to this next slide. This is not meant to be, this is better than a 1031. This is just different. Okay. As investors, we always want to know, what are my options? And sometimes there's an ideal option. And if there's an ideal 1031 exchange, I have another one I'm doing right now, which is going to be an ideal 1031 exchange. And because of that, I'm going that direction. But what I don't want, it makes me a little bit ill to think of the capital gains tax I've paid since the OZ was an option, and until I uncovered that it was a possibility for me, and I look at the capital gains tax on some securities and on some real estate that I paid, and I look at what that could have grown and compounded to if I had known about this opportunity zone strategy, it makes me ill to think about it. Okay. So, but like all of us, what do? We take the knowledge at hand, and then we make the best decisions moving forward. So just real quickly to do a little bit of a comparison, and I understand, I think there's going to be a fair amount of real estate professionals on this as well. If you're a real estate professional, every single one of your investor clients needs to know that this is something that is an option for them, because many of them don't want to continue to deal with real estate. Maybe they have a property, to James's point earlier, they have a property, they're tired, it's working, it's kind of working, but if they sell, they're going to have a huge tax hit. And so this is another sale that could be ideal for them and for you to represent them by bringing this idea, because they will just hold it forever, maybe, and deal with it. But what they would much rather do is sell this property, take their basis back, and then take the gain portion and move it into the qualified opportunity fund to have those tax benefits later. So anyway, I just share this because looking at it as a 360, I say this for me as an investor, I'm always thinking and when I look at investing in any opportunity, there's a number of things that I factor, and I just want to share this real quick, and then we'll do the comparison. But it's not just money, it's time, money, stress, risk, and then growth opportunity. And a lot of times, like, investors will just think at the money and the growth, and they don't think about the time and the stress side and the risk side. And so I bring this up because this was a lifesaver for me, because all of a sudden now I could have a really good A or B option instead of just an A option or a tax option. Okay. And that was the aha moment for me. So now looking at this, let's just
Mike,
do a quick.
let me jump in real quick.
Yep.
Something else that I think the real estate professionals on this call should be aware of is that when someone sells a primary residence, obviously this is a great idea for people who own rentals. They're going to be exposed to capital gains. But if you sell a primary and you're a single person and your profit exceeds $250,000, that is subject to capital gains as well. There is a tax exclusion. This would probably be triggered for single people who've owned for a long time that have created a lot of net profit. But those dollars that are exposed to capital gains can go into this fund and defer in the same way. So just keep that in mind too.
Because they wouldn't have that option as a 1031 because it's not an investment property. Yeah.
That's right.
And a good question could be, do you have real estate that you would sell if you weren't going to have a significant tax hit? And asking that of your investors, because I would have had that in the past. I mean, those have been my two pain points. And one of them was I wanted to sell, I wanted to move something else, and I had a 1031 exchange that worked out. Okay, perfect. Another time, 1031 exchange, it didn't work out. Guess what? Big tax bill, didn't plan on that. This is an ideal situation for that. Others, they're just not doing anything because they don't know it's an option and they don't want a 1031, but they want to get out of that particular asset or maybe diversify. A lot of people I know have had a tremendously positive run in real estate for a long time. Now we're looking at a market that has, potentially, we have a lot of support just between this, massive demographic shift that's taking place and a severe inventory shortage, which is one of the things that we're, capitalizing with our group. And then also we have an affordability issue, which is going to, for a while, limit some upside. So it'll probably go sideways for a while in real estate, maybe slightly down, certain areas slightly up. I mean, real estate's regional. My point being, there's a lot of people that would say, if I could take some chips off the table and I don't have to 1031, I'd be very interested. Okay. And so for the real estate professionals on the call, this is something that I'm going to say 1 out of 100 people, maybe 3 out of 100 have actually heard this, and 1 out of 100 has any level of expertise in meaningful conversation. I actually have a close friend of mine down here that it was a competitive listing agreement. He brought this opportunity zone strategy. The other 2 people that were also, competing for the listing didn't. And of course, he got the listing because he brought a fresh idea that gave that individual a great path to go down. So use this as you see fit for your investors. But I'm telling you, as an investor personally, if somebody brings me fresh thinking and a fresh idea, you better believe that I'm going to look at them very different and better than others. So that said, we'll go through the 1031 exchange versus OZs. The OZ investing is interesting because it's very similar, but in a different way. With a 1031 exchange, you have 45 days to identify a property, and you have 180 days to then move from one to the other. And of course, the money goes to an accommodator. It never touches your possession. You sell the property, you identify, you sell the property, goes to the accommodator, then moves from the accommodator to the new property. You don't have tangible receipt. With the OZ fund, it's very different. You can sell a property. Oops, so we lose our slides.
Yeah, I think Trevor may have dropped off the call here.
Okay, well, we'll get him back in a minute. I'll just talk through this. You can sell your property, and then you have 180 days to be able to take the money from your possession and move it into a qualified opportunity fund. So any individual that's on the call right now, you can look back from, we open again in June. So if you've got funds that you've received between January and June, that will be eligible for the June contribution. Okay, the June on-ramp, so to speak. So anyway, that's kind of interesting. And maybe I can share my screen, and this would be a first for me because I'm not technical, James, but maybe we can pull this off.
I did assign you as someone who could share the screen.
Okay, gotcha. And let me just talk through the difference on the 1031 exchange versus the OZ for another minute or two. In fact, just to make sure, do we still have an audience, or is it just you and me?
No, we have an audience still. It's
okay, got it. All right, I see him.
Texting Trevor. Somehow he clicked the wrong button.
Okay, got it. Okay, so back to the 1031 versus OZ difference. There he is. He's coming in. One of the other things that's different is that with an opportunity zone investing, you only are required and you only get the preferential tax treatment on the gains. So let's just say you have a property that is $1 million and you have 500,000 of gains and you have 500,000 of basis. Different than a 1031 where you just push it all into a new property that's going to be, you're replacing debt and maybe it's, a $1.1 million purchase, whatever it is. Instead, you can take the $500,000 of basis back to you, and you don't pay tax on that. That's your basis. And you take the gain portion only, and you put the gain portion in the fund. And that's the part that is now treated and is able to grow and have that 10-year run and exit tax deferred. So now, that said, the way we've set up our fund, it's meant to be investor friendly. And I've done this really thinking from an investor. What are the most important things to an investor? I want the option. Let's just say life happens and I need to get some money. We have created, think of it kind of like a 1-year CD. We have an opportunity for an investor, if they need to pull funds out, any of their gains, they can do that every January. We need a 90-day notice, but they can do it January. So the question was, what is the most flexible we can be without compromising the integrity of our, investment and growth structure? And that was what we came up with that I thought I would share. So don't think of it as like I'm locked up for 10 years because that can freak people out. But think of it kind of like a Roth IRA. If it stays in there until you're 59 and a half with a Roth IRA, at that point, you then get to have all of that come out tax-free. But if you take it out beforehand, it's taxable. Okay. There's some caveats to that. But on this side, with the opportunity zone, if you need to get to the funds, you can do that every January is my point. So we wanted to have as much latitude as possible. And then keep in mind, guys, this is not just real estate. If you've sold securities, some folks, the crypto world's imploded. So it's a different conversation. We won't go there.
They're not seeing any gains.
Yeah, I don't know if anyone has any gains there. We're talking write-offs, but you can see, it looks like we've got the screen back. You can see the difference side by side, the investment comparison. So
there's a question here that I think is a good time to address, which is what we were talking about right before the call, which is how is depreciation recapture handled? Because those are the two areas of pain when you sell a rental property. It's like, yeah, I made $300,000. I got to pay tax on that. But then the secret thing that no one ever talks about is like, oh, also you owe $45,000 of depreciation recapture. That was just temporary.
Right. Do you want to take that one? You've got the Cliff Notes, or do you want me to take that?
Trevor?
Yeah, the short answer, again, this is getting into the tax area, but the short answer is it goes along with a deferral, and then there's no depreciation recapture on the back end. So
Trevor, the depreciation on the real estate that you sell before you put money into the OZ fund. What happens to is the depreciation recapture triggered that tax year, or is this sort of bundled in? Because a 1031 exchange would protect you from having to do depreciation recapture on that sale. You just keep kind of rolling it forward. When you sell this and you put the gains into the OZ fund, next year you're paying taxes. You're like, yeah, I sold a house, but I put money into the OZ fund. Will your accountant say, okay, cool, well, tell me when the money comes out and then we'll deal with it then? Or they say, okay, well, we still have to recapture depreciation.
I'm going to defer to the tax counsel on that. My understanding is it's treated as the capital gains on the front end. So I don't want to get over my skis. I'm a little unclear on that part.
Okay.
But
that's an important
I will
thing.
say
we'll get an answer to that and make sure we email the attendees on that, because that's a really important piece to be clear on, I think.
Yep, 100%. And guys, this is, again, what we're doing is we're looking at this from a 30,000 foot perspective. There's 1,000 questions that come up, and that's one of them. And just in all candor, we are not tax attorneys or tax counsel. We are investors that are thinking through how do we best maximize every opportunity available to us. I've heard a couple of different things on the depreciation. So obviously that's a portion of the decision. So connect with your CPA to get the answer directly, and we will see if we can have some IRS language that we can find and cut and paste and send out to the group? Really good question, but I would rather stay away from that because I'm not a licensed CPA, neither is Trevor. So what we do know is on the exit, you will have on growth of, as our investments are growing and we're working through different projects, there will be depreciation play that will come through, but on the exit, that depreciation is not recaptured because that is seen as capital gains. So again, there's a lot of different questions that come out of this. Get with your CPA for the specifics on it, but don't forget about the broader strategy for capital gains versus a 1031.
Totally.
Okay. Ideal investors. Next slide here. So accredited investors, that's one important caveat. So an investor in this strategy and fund and opportunity zone needs to be accredited. What is accredited? An accredited investor means that you have a couple of things. $1 million of net worth, excluding your primary residence, or you have 200,000 of income as an individual or 300,000 of income as a couple. Okay. This is, again, one of the reasons why a lot of people are not aware of it, is because it's only available for accredited investors. Most of the people that have a lot of real estate, they don't even know this, but they're accredited investors because of equity buildup if you've been sitting on real estate for a while. And again, it makes no sense to me that you can have, somebody that is a, Harvard professor that's not an accredited investor because they're making, 250,000 or whatever, like instead of 300. My point being, or just under 200. But my point being, these are rules that are in place by SEC that we all have to follow, and so I want to make sure that that's clear. So for the fund, it's a $100,000 minimum and an accredited investor. Ideal investors, capital gains from sold real estate, accredited investor, busted 1031 after the 45 days. Owners selling. I have a friend that's a business broker, and when he has folks that are selling their business, sometimes what they'll do is they usually a lot of that's capital gain, so they'll take a portion of the capital gain and move it into the fund. They're like, I want X amount, I'll pay the tax on X amount, but it's not like you have to move all or nothing. So if you have $1 million gain, you can say, I'll take 500,000, pay the tax, I want to do whatever I want with it, and I'll move 500,000 into the Opportunity Zone Fund. Investors who want to access tax-free cash from appreciated property. Yep. Tired landlords who want to become a passive investor, real estate professionals on this call. Homeowners with large gains, James, to your point, in excess of exclusion from the sale of primary residence. Okay, perfect. So we'll go to this next slide, and then we'll start to move into a little bit more of the Q&A. Specifically, and I'm going to guess, James, is that a lot of real estate, maybe some financial advisor professionals on this call, and then some investors, just for the cross-section. Real strategies to help real estate professionals be aware of this at all times in conversations with folks that are, a little higher end, more sophisticated, and have property. The likelihood of them knowing about this strategy is pretty minimal. This is a way for you to set yourself apart from the competition. And we all know in this market, sales numbers, I'm not talking value, sales numbers are off depending on the area, 30 to 35%, 40% nationwide. Looks like look at your state for a whole series of reasons. But we know there's a lot of pent-up demand, a whole series of reasons as well. But we also know there's a lot of people that if they knew they had a strategy like this, they would consider selling. This could be an opportunity to bring inventory to the market that no one is thinking about. Okay, gain more investor clients, offer solutions for sellers who feel trapped, build your network, financial professionals, others, and then get more listings and set yourself apart by offering this as an option. So we want to share that. And then finally, to get to some action steps, let's see here, action steps, schedule a call, cyrusozfund.com. If you have interest personally, or maybe a client that has interest, we do a complimentary consultation just to walk through, and then Trevor's actually created a really helpful spreadsheet that helps an individual to understand and illustrates over time the difference between just paying tax on something and then reinvesting it versus what this looks like in the Opportunity Zone strategy. Okay, so if you'd like a little bit more guidance and maybe a personalized situation for yourself or for a client, we've got an Excel sheet that can help give you the big picture really quickly so you don't have to calculate all this on your own. So let me hit pause. James, we've covered a lot. Again, this is meant to be 30,000 foot and help people see something that maybe wasn't on the radar before. And just in closing my remarks formally, this was set up for me as an investor to solve my own pain. And my thought process was, how many more people are out there that have the same issue and just don't know that this is an option? And it was, again, almost by accident for me that this came up. And I realized this is a once in, I don't know, 50, 75, 100 years of tax code where we have a window of time from 2017, actually it was like 2018 and change when it was formalized and there was clarity on it, to 2026. And after that, it sunsets and it'll be gone. So I am a huge fan of this personally. And I've been, more recently starting to speak about this because I think a lot of investors need to know about this. So thank you guys for listening. James, over to you.
Time and stress is key for real estate investors going into a 1031 exchange. They're stressed out. They're trying to sell themselves the idea of I guess this property will work. I'm not sure. It's not as good as I thought it would be, but I'm committed now. I have to do something. This takes a lot of stress out of that moment for a seller. So I love that as idea as a plan B. I love the idea as a great option for someone who's just ready to trim their real estate portfolio. And their plan was just to pay the tax, right? Now they have an option to defer the tax. The money that goes into the fund, we didn't really talk about this, that money is growing, right? The fund is paying a return on investment, and that growth is tax-free, right? So that growth, if you put $1 million in it and leave it there for 10 years, if the rule of 72 would say that would, if it gets a 7.2% return over that period of time, it'll double, compounded. So you pull $2 million out, that second million is tax-free. And at that point, you will pay. So how does this work? Let's say you keep it in for 10 years, but the taxes are due in 2027. Can you pull money out of the fund to pay the taxes at that time? Or what's the
great question. Yep, you absolutely can. So we've set, again, this is set up to be investor friendly. So we've set up the ability for an investor, if they want to pay the taxes, if you have outside liquidity, fantastic. Taxes are due in 2027 on the gains. But again, you have 4 years of compounding growth on the money before the taxes are due, from today, roughly.
4 years to save and prepare.
Save and prepare, right? Or use other assets. But if you want this to stand on its own, we've set up the ability to do what's called a margin loan of up to 20% of your initial contribution, which is long-term capital gains. And then we have an equal crediting rate. So it's a wash loan in a sense. So you are charged 6% interest, but you are also in a 6% investment fixed account. And what you do then is you take that out of the fund to use to pay your taxes. So you've effectively taken that off the table from a future growth standpoint, but you've been able to pay your taxes from this standalone solution. So that was our way of working around this. And then thinking, yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to jump in real quick and say we have that marked out. That's part of what the calculator shows, because it's not just a simple apples to apples straight line compound interest, for 10 years here versus 10 years there and then taxes on the front and the back. We have multiple scenarios showing that money gets taken out on this certain date, or another option that sometimes people could utilize is paying the taxes from an outside source, right? Because if you look at this and you say, well, my money's growing tax-free, why would I take a portion of that out? I'm just going to go ahead and pay my taxes from another source. So IRS, of course, doesn't care where you pay your taxes from, as long as the check clears. So we have that as in our calculator. We have that as another path or option as well to show.
Mike and Trevor, can you see the questions in the Q&A, or is it just me? Do I need to serve them up to you?
Nope, I can see them. I just found them all. Just
All right.
looking
Yeah,
through them now.
there's a good
And
little
one
backlog
thing
of
while you're
questions.
looking at that, Mike, I'll clarify something. So the 2026 date, well, there's a couple things. This might answer a couple of the questions. As of now, the program is set to sunset at the end of 2026. That's for new investment. So of course, that's not 10 years from now. So of course, the program itself is actually, forget the exact year, I think as of now, it's into the 2040s. So there's plenty of time for having a new investment go the full 10-year cycle. So again, that's only for new investors on the front end. There is some legislation that could maybe extend that, but it's up in the air still. But as of now, it's sunset for new investors at the end of 2026 and then of course it extends so that those projects can be continued.
Yep, some good questions. I'll just take some of these. First one from Shannon: the benefit of deferring capital gains until 2027, other than paying it this year. Just if let's just say you have $1 million and you've got $200,000 of tax due today, then that would prevent that $1 million from growing. And if you've got a 10% growth rate, just for easy math, on that $1 million, you're going to have 1.1 million the next year, and then 1.21 million the next year. So you've got more money working for you for a 4-year window at minimum. So if there's ever the opportunity to defer paying tax off the top, as opposed to, I kind of think of it, if you pay tax, think about it as if you were getting a negative 20% return on your investment, like year one, because of the tax being paid. So that would be the recommendation for deferring it. There's another question down there that I saw that was related to the growth. No, the growth is going to participate. It'll follow the participation of the fund. Our fund, our track record so far, we launched this about 2.5 years ago, is we're running just over 13% rate of return, 13.5% rate of return. And our model, as my dad taught me, he said, be more concerned about the return of your money than the return on your money. So we're making the money when we buy. And we've got a very clear plan for being able to, my target is 1% per month or 12% annualized, because what that means is that, back to what James was saying, rule of 72, if you have a 12% rate of return over 10 years, that means money is going to triple and exit tax free. Okay, it's actually technically 11.6. At 11.6% growth rate, $1 million becomes $3 million over 10 years with a tax-free exit. Okay, so that's my thinking as an investor in my plan personally. And so another good question. Dan, 100,000 buy-in, that's right. That's one of the requirements that we have. So there can be smaller amounts after there's an initial 100,000. So we have one investor that had a $100,000 contribution, and then he's got a $50,000 that comes in the next time and 75 the next time, but it's 100,000 minimum, and then it can be incremental from there. So let me take a breath, Trevor, see if there's any questions you want to take while I'm getting some water here.
The income to be an accredited investor, Brad was asking, 200,000 on a 1099 or a W-2? I think it's got to be W-2. If it's 200,000 1099, we would probably accredit you, thinking as a mortgage guy, based on your taxable income. So if you make 200,000 on a 1099, you have $50,000 of expenses, you actually make $150,000. That'd be my guess. Obviously, I'm learning this here along with you, Brad, but
let me address that. This is something that is really more self-police. There's not an accredited investor police that goes out there and investigates your tax returns. And so this is a self-declaration. Okay. And so what we as a fund have to do is we need you to self-declare. And so I would do some research on what qualifies technically as an accredited investor, and how do those things move around. I don't know the answer to that, but I know that we're going to err on the side of caution a little bit. But we did have one investor that was really close, and you can make an argument on investment property, like, okay, if an appraisal came, we're not getting appraisals on things,
right,
but with this particular investor, you could argue that it was right there at the $1 million. It was 975, or it was like 1 point, just above it. So we're fine with that, is the point. My point is that you self-decide that and be honorable in it. You just have to certify that you're accredited. So I know, and that changes sometimes. Sometimes, like, next year they might have a slight change to what the accreditation means, but that's where it is today. let's see. How does Cyrus survive long term once Opportunity Zone timelines is great? Oh, really good question. So we will continue to do the investments. Okay. And so what we'll do is we'll talk to each investor, because this is a model that works. I mean, and this is something I've been doing personally for a long time. And we're doing it in the fund now because it's obviously way better from a tax advantage standpoint. But any investor, you can self-assess at the 10-year mark, actually even before, every year, I want some money. Okay, fine. Or at the 10-year mark, give me all my money tax-free. Fantastic. You still have to put it somewhere, right? So at that point, if it's me, you assess, I like the strategy of the fund that you're going. We have updates that go out, all the time. I like the strategy, or no, I want all my money back to go into something else, or you just will not continue to have the compounding tax-free. It would be just like a regular mutual fund, and we will make informed and opportunistic decisions at the 10-year mark, actually kind of like at the 7, 8, 9-year mark, it'll be rolling of what the options are. That's a really good question. Trevor, why don't you take a few? I'm going to get some water.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. That it kind of is under the umbrella of the question of clarifying about the front end versus the back end, right? Taking in new investors. So sometimes the underlying fear is, well, if I join the fund now, you're telling me is the rug going to get pulled out because I was the last one in? And the answer is no. It's going to be 10 years plus for that investment horizon. And I don't know, that is just a nice way to look at it too. It kind of forces the long-term generational wealth building way to look at things and smooths out, whatever bumps along the way, like obviously volatility in the market and things that we saw this last year. So it's a really good way to, I like to think of it as in a couple ways. It's a key to unlocking your own capital, or a key to unlocking your equity, right? Without deferring till you die. And almost as like a parallel or sidecar to, you can be an active investor, you can have your job, you can be doing these other things, generating income, investing in shorter term projects, things like that. But this is kind of that silent passenger along the way that's riding you out for those 10 years. Maybe it's, kids' college fund in the future, or generational wealth that's being passed down, or things like that. So yeah, the short answer to a lot of those questions, I think, is that the timeline on the back end is plenty of room to continue doing those projects. And like Mike said, this is a fund that's meant to stand on its own legs. So we like to say that, Opportunity Zone doesn't make a bad deal good, but it makes a good deal great. And so we're not going in and trying to, say, hey, we can whip something up on paper that all of a sudden, well, on paper you make this. And so like, no, we're looking for great deals. And then the cherry on top is the Opportunity Zone tax benefits.
James, any of the others you want us to focus on? There's
yeah, I
got a hard stop coming.
One of the questions David said, what is the investor status in the fund? Partner, limited partner, shareholder, ... question mark.
Yep. So yep, they would be a shareholder, and it would be we have it's a limited partnership, and they hold shares. So we revalue, I'll talk through this for a minute. We revalue the fund, and we open to new investors every January and every July. January and July are the on-ramps, and then any off-ramps, if needed, are January. And so we have a valuation that takes place for each of those different windows. And so then that allows new investors to come in at whatever the current valuation is. So, and then as far as zones that we're investing in, a lot of this is I'm in Southern California, and we have a lot of off-market opportunities that exist just with my existing relationships. We have a Texas project. We're looking at some business in Idaho. We're just very opportunistic, but the things that we do, again, it's where do we have boots on the ground, and where can we buy into value that is above mom and pop and below Wall Street, and that's the place we stay in. We stay in. So we're expanding, and we'll continue to, but we're going to stay where we know we have a model that works and works well, and it's worked well for us the last couple of years, and we've been able to navigate the sharpest turn in real estate history in 15 years with, and still run. Last 6 months or last year, we were positive, I think 4%, where the rest of the world and REITs got crushed in S&P. So now we're buying some stuff pretty deep, But even in a really sharp turn, we were able to, just because we're buying right, and we're not leveraged, we're not high leverage, we're cash purchases, and we just take a very conservative approach. And if something doesn't matter how good it might look on paper, if it doesn't feel right and we don't have good boots on the ground, we're just going to pass. There's way too many opportunities. Again, it's safety and preservation of principal first, with solid long-term returns that will be, I mean, I'd be happy with 7.2 over and doubling tax-free, but I do think just on our strategy that we'll be able to be at the 12% and tax-free, tripling the money tax-free. That's my personal goal, and that's what we're after. And as long as the risks we're very comfortable with it, that's what we'll do.
There's a question, what zones are you investing in? Obviously, the answer to that is opportunity zones, but I think like what markets?
Yeah, and I was just covering that.
Yeah.
California, mainly Southern California areas that we know really well, where we just get a lot of at-bats that are kind of off market. And then, you know, a little bit of Texas, a little bit of Idaho business.
I want to jump in here on one of them because I know we're coming up kind of on our time cutoff here. But Dan asked if you can only buy into the fund in January and July, sells the property August 1st, to incur taxes because you can't put the money until January. And the answer is no. It's within 180 days. So in addition to just simplicity's sake, the reason why we open up twice a year, January and July, is to catch those 180 days. Basically. So that's part of our, and kind of my role too, is spreading the good word of letting everybody know sooner rather than later that they can plan for this and say, okay, I'm going to be ready for your July opening, or I'm going to be ready for your January opening. So whether I've been talking to someone who's, you know, sold a business late last year, some property at the end of the year, they weren't aware of the January opening. We've talked recently, and it's going to work out to get into July. So the point is, he shared his screen. That's okay. Make sure I didn't screw some up. But so anyway, so that's the reason. So the answer is, as long as it's within that 180 days from a capital event, sale of a business or sale of real estate, close of escrow, whatever it is, you'll be fine.
Yep, the twice a year is. What's that, James? Gotcha.
Can you hear me? Because there we go.
Yep.
Whoop. Okay. Got a little crazy there. I'm going to share my screen before we wrap up. I really appreciate everyone's time here today. I wanted to kind of put a bow on this a little bit and think about, now that we know this idea, I have this document that I created that I'm going to share with participants or people who watch this recording, because I think this can be a strategy to bring to the market to create listings. That was kind of the headline of this event, Bright, is like how to use the strategy to get more listings. And I think if just knowing about it will put you at the top of the pack of real estate professionals. And I think it's important for people to know that this is a great conversation to have with people who own multiple properties. Obviously, we need inventory right now. We need listings. So this is why this is such a powerful moment for this. There's a limited window of opportunity for this. It's a great idea. Whether or not they act on it, I think you'll get some, some personal equity with that real estate property owner for just bringing this idea to them, whether or not they act on it. But I do think that a pretty good percentage of people who learn about this will strongly consider selling a property. So you'll get a listing, you'll improve that investor's life financially. You will improve that community by maybe giving an opportunity for a family to buy it for themselves. And so I kind of came up with a list of who, obviously most realtors can think of a person off the top of their head right now, just like, oh yeah, I should talk to this guy or that guy that I know that owns a few properties. But I think if you wanted to scale this, I would consider, who else do you know professionally that might also have access to a lot of information about who owns a lot of rental real estate, and I think that the answer to that is a financial advisor. So if you're a real estate professional, talk to your financial advisor, or if you're in a networking group that has a financial advisor in it, bring this idea to them. Think about collaborating with other professionals to talk to their clients about this idea. Property managers obviously have a huge list of clients that own multiple properties. Property and casualty insurance professionals is a good idea too to collaborate with. They have huge lists of families that they serve, and they'll know of that list who owns multiple properties. Those would be a great touch for them to collaborate with a real estate agent on. I think estate planning attorneys is another good one to talk to. They oftentimes are, executing estates, and they're handing over portfolios of real estate to younger people. This is a great moment for that. Well, I guess if you inherit a bunch of real estate and you sell it immediately, there's really not a lot of taxable gain. But maybe an estate planning attorney would say, I know this woman who inherited 30 properties like 3 years ago. We should probably bring this idea to her. Maybe she'll sell a few of them. Maybe this would be a good idea. Maybe she would rather not own all these properties, So I think an estate planning attorney could be a great person to bring this idea to scale, right? So anyway, I've created a document and a script. So I'll be following up with you guys individually after the call with that go-to-market strategy. So that's the show. I really appreciate everyone's participation. Let me make sure there's no. Ward has a cool comment here. I have a friend who sold a property in Opportunity Zone areas, just paying the taxes for lack of 1031. Can you address this question, Mike or Trevor?
Yeah, just real quickly. I mean, this is the exact type of thought that we want to get stirring. So we'd love for you to set up a call and we can go a little bit more into it. We want to be respectful of everybody's time. But the short answer is, if you've got a property that's already in an opportunity zone, it might help to reach out to some opportunity zone funds like ours that may be interested in it. There's certain requirements that we have to meet as far as substantial improvement, things like that are a few hoops to jump through. So it's not always automatically a great deal just because it's in an OZ. As well as selling it from an OZ, the capital gains come out the same. So it doesn't matter that you sold a property in an OZ. So that's a really quick answer, but would love to hop on the phone and chat.
Yeah, so Ward, that person, if they just sold it and it's been less than 180 days, you might be able to still accommodate a strategy that defers some of that tax.
James, there's a podcast that I did recently, which is I think it's a Real Estate Road to Riches podcast. That's sort of a high level of the OZ. That if this is a complicated topic to explain sometimes. So if there's real estate professionals that want to get a copy of that to forward it to a client to listen to and just sort of get a grip on it, we can make that available. So I just thought about that.
All right. Well, I appreciate it. I've got all the attendees and then people who signed up and didn't show up, so that we'll kind of make sure we're getting all this recording and other information to them. I'm going to stop the recording now.
Here, I'll put that